Welcome everybody to our latest installment of our webinar series. As Darren said, delighted to be here this evening, this month with three of the best active coaches in Europe currently from 3 different countries, and have a discussion with those guys for the next sort of 90 minutes around a whole bunch of different topics. And then for half an hour at the end, there's your opportunity to ask questions of them, and we will field those questions appropriately. So first up, currently residing in Finland, but has coached in Australia, in the US, here in the UK. A lot of people will be familiar with him. He's worked with a number of elite male and female vaulters, but also done some great development work along the way as well. So welcome, Steve Rippon.
Good evening, guys. Nice to be here tonight.
Thank you very much. And then next up from Sweden is Gustav, and Gustav is working with some of Sweden's top vaulters right now, including Michaela Meyer, who broke the Swedish national record this year with 483, and a number of other male vaulters, a couple of whom have jumped 580 plus in the last couple of seasons. So great to have you with us, Gustav.
Hi guys, glad to be here.
And then finally, from Belgium, Stephen, who has been coaching for 15 or so years now, and we just realized that we first met one another back in the early 90s when we were pole vaulting together. And in fact, everybody on the call this evening is a former pole vaulter, so there's a lot of passion for the event in the room. But Stephen has been working with Belgian vaulter Ben Broders for a long period of time now, and has progressed him really nicely up to and including his national records of 580 indoors and outdoors this season. So it'll be great to hear a little bit more about that later on this evening. But welcome, Stephen.
Thank you.
And he's got his Belgian beer to boot, so it's going to be a good evening, I think. Right, guys, we'll kick off because I'm conscious last time I did this we overran a little bit, so we'll try and get cracking. Please feel free to say whatever you like, be as informative, as comprehensive as you like, but keep it a little bit tight. Just try not to go on too much, because otherwise we're going to be here till tomorrow. I'm going to come to Steve Rippon first. Steve, just to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit about your coaching journey so far, how it all started for you, and some of the journey that you've been on up until now?
Yeah, it's funny, I don't consider myself to be an elder statesman, but kind of when you put in the questions that I've done 30 years of coaching, I kind of feel like, well, I coached you to start with, Scott. So I see many of my former vaulters now holding senior positions themselves. So I kind of feel like I am the elder statesman now. But yeah, so I mean, I started pole vaulting in Perth in Western Australia. As we know, it's the most isolated city in the world. And at the time, there was no one jumping more than 3 meters. So me and some mates, we found some poles in the shed, and we taught ourselves how to jump. And I jumped 380 in my first year, then 4 meters, 420, 445. And then I started coaching because, basically there was no one else coaching. And I met this young 13-year-old 400-meter runner, a guy called James Miller, who just ran 60 seconds for the 400. And I said to him, "You want to try pole vault?" So I coached James from the age of 13 right up to the 96 Olympics. So, that was kind of my first generation of athletes, and that's where I kind of learned my trade. And then from there followed Paul Burgess, Kim Howe, and multiple other Australians. But so one of the things you asked about is how I've seen the different places I've worked in Australia, America, Great Britain, and Finland, how the different pole vault structures work. And it's quite interesting because Australia is a country of 20 million people, and they've had a great amount of success, with athletes like Steve Hooker, Paul Burgess, both jumping over 6 meters. And then Dmitry Markov obviously moved to Australia along with Tatiana Grigorieva and Viktor Chistiakov. And they were they developed their pole vaulting skills in Australia in the time they were there. And then, they've had phenomenal success with the women as well. Emma George jumped from 425 to 460. I mean, a lot of people forgot that she took the world record from 14 feet to 15 feet. Tatiana won silver medal in Sydney. Alana Boyd was 4th in Rio. Kim Howe competed in the Athens Olympics, So when you know the Australian system, it's really a needle-based system. So a very small, tight number of pole vaulters. So they really have to maximize the potential of every pole vaulter they get. And if you visit Australia at the Sports Institute and the structures there, it's really schooled around getting the most out of the small talent pool they have. And, there's a fantastic group right now working in Perth with Paul Burgess. Curtis Marshall is one of the leading lights to come out of there. Nina Kennedy jumped 470 last year. So, they've got a great tradition, and it's really, going to keep moving forward. But, so that's basically where I learnt my trade. And then I moved then from there, spent a year in New York working at Columbia University. It was interesting to see how the NCAA system worked. They've got 330 million people in America. I think probably over 80% of the world's pole vaulters are probably coming out of America. 300 Division I colleges, huge collegiate and high school sport. Not a great club-based system. There is a lot of private clubs which kind of run professionally, and a bit the model that gymnastics does in a lot of other countries. But if America ever got their act together and really develop talent like countries like Australia and Britain do, then they would dominate the world like they did. We know that they won every Olympic gold medal up until 1980, did they? Yeah,
76.
up till 1980. Yeah, 76 was the last time, yeah. So, they really dominated for a long, long time. And then, I worked in Britain for 12 years, developed a high-performance training centre at Loughborough. When I first moved there, that was a sports university. And we kind of changed that into, like a real sports institute now. And that's like a one-stop shop for developing talent. That didn't exist when I moved to Britain in 99. There was very few indoor facilities. Now we have a lot of indoor facilities in Britain. Most vaulters live 1 hour from an indoor hall. So we know in pole vault it's really important that you have access to regular training in the winter as well as the summer. So I think that Britain, traditionally it didn't really develop its vaulters as well as it has. It still has a bit of an issue with trying to get people to relocate to maximise the potential of the centres and the coaching pool that you guys have. And now I'm based in Finland. I've been here for 8 years, and we know Finland's got a great tradition for pole vault. The first man to jump 5 meters was a Finnish guy, Pentti Nikkola, and he jumped it at the Sports Institute where I work. He did 3 world records in one day, 5:05, 5:10. Finland's a small country of 5 million people, but generally we get 2 pole vaulters at every Olympics. And so we have a really strong kind of pole vaulting community. A lot of the old pole vaulters are coaching their own children or still involved in the sport. Scott and Gustav have been to the pole vault carnival we have every summer, where we get 150 vaulters together for 4 days. And we have, a big carnival. That's the backbone of our coach education program. And that's really where knowledge is shared. So, that's kind of my journey and what I've been on. But the one thing I will say is that gravity is the same in every country I've worked at, which is the constant that we have, but and pole vaulters around the world all have a passion for the event. It's something that's in our system for life. I think that's generic about pole vaulters around the world, but it's been a great event and a great sport, and I made a living out of it. So I've been pretty lucky in the last 30 years, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Great. Steve, thanks so much for taking us on the journey. It was fascinating. But one follow-up question, if I may. I mean, we've known each other for 20 years now, and nearly, I think, which is crazy. But you've been coaching for over 30 years. So if you could sum up, what's the biggest kind of global change that you've seen in pole vaulting from, let's say, the early 90s, 30 years ago, to where we are now? We'll stay away from certain topics if you get my meaning, but
Sure.
What's the biggest changes that you've seen over the 30 years of your time coaching pole vault?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day when I took James Miller to his first Olympics. He went there in Atlanta in '96, jumped 560 on his second attempt, didn't make the final. And then when I sat there and looked at the final, there was 9 Soviets in that final out of 12 guys. So that was just after the Soviet Union broke up. So there was a real big influx of the Soviet pole vaulters in the 90s, really dominating the event at major championships. And that kind of froze everybody out for a while. And then the Soviets started to move around the world. So, the Chistyakov, Markov, Grigoriev moved to Australia. Patapovic was in Sweden, but still competed for Kazakhstan. But they kind of really branched out. And I think there was like a 10, 15-year period where they had a big influence on the sport. Now I think things have kind of settled down, and we're seeing now a lot more natives from their own countries really competing for their countries. And it's the great thing is we have athletes from South Africa, from Brazil, from Australia, from Britain, from all over the world that are very competitive in this event. It's not dominated by a single nation or a single race like we see in the middle and long distance, which favors the Africans. The sprint events are favored by the Jamaicans. So, it's the only event in track and field where the implement aids performance, and if you've got the skill to master that implement, it makes a big difference. And I think that's why I love coaching it, because I think as coaches, we can make a huge difference on someone's performance by teaching them the skill of being able to work with the pole.
Absolutely. Cool. Interesting. Stephen, if I come to you next, can you're a young-ish coach, but can you maybe take us on your journey as maybe as an athlete very briefly, and then into your coaching journey that you've been on?
Well, as an athlete, I can be very short. I didn't really do a lot. I did have an opportunity to jump in South Africa with Ockert and Tim Lobinger at that time. Learned a lot of those guys. Did jump in the US, basically in college, but didn't even make 5 meters. So not really that high as an athlete. I was injured a lot, and that's how I kind of rolled into the coaching. When I was about 21, being injured, there was an athlete that I trained with that had some problems that I thought that I could fix, and said that I could get him to jump higher, but that I had to break him down and kind of build him up again. And so we did, and we got some great results from that. And other athletes started joining, and I started working out less and less, getting injured more and more, I guess. And so I quit at a certain time my own career and started coaching. And so when that's basically also how I do my coaching in the beginning with younger athletes, is do a lot of injury prevention, because I think it's very important knowing that for myself. And when I was like, I think about 25, 26, there was this little blonde guy that knocked on my door. His name was Ben Bruders. I was coaching his brother at the time. And he said he wanted in. The only problem was he couldn't really come to all practices because he had to go home early from his parents because he was still that young. But it worked out at the end.
Fantastic.
So basically, that's it.
Very cool. Just something I wanted to kind of pick up on very quickly there. You talked about like injury prevention in your young athletes. So can you give us an example of kind of how you do that? What's the sort of things you're doing to help you set up a long career for athletes?
Basically, a lot of stability, a lot of core stability. That's the main topic that I never did when I was an athlete. I never heard of stability or core stability. So basically, that's something that I got into our practices really early, and that helped a lot, I think, to get people ready to jump before they even start jumping.
Absolutely. Cool. Look, I want to talk a bit about Ben because he is super exciting. You know, he's got one of the nicest looking jumps on the circuit right now. You've obviously done a great job working with him. So we'll have a quick look at one of his jumps, and then I have a question I really kind of want to ask you and hopefully unpick a little bit if that's okay. But let me
Sure.
let me share my screen with the audience. Hopefully this works. Let's go to his first 580 jump, which was indoors this year. Where was this, Stephen?
Yeah, this is in Liévin in France. I think the end of February this year. It's kind of strange to see it with a crowd like this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But it was a great competition and a great atmosphere. And he was doing really well. I think it's about his 10th competition in indoors at that time. So, and this is at this record height, 580.
Awesome. Love it. So just before we kind of talk a little bit about Ben, maybe I'll try and put up another jump as well. This is his outdoor record of 580. Am I right?
Yeah,
was,
this
was
is
this
in Rome.
Rome?
Mhm.
Yeah, in Rome.
Yep.
Okay. So how many steps is Ben jumping from?
He's on an 18 step.
Okay, and what pole? 5 or 5'10"?
This is a 5'10".
Okay.
So 5'10", 13.6, I think.
Okay. And is and how tall is he, and what does he weigh?
He weighs 73, 74 kilos, and is about 1.78 m. Rather small, I think, if you would compare.
Pretty light. And yeah, we talked a bit about this last month with the Bolters when they were on. We talked about the men's event starting to trend a little bit more that way. You know, less massive guys that we saw in the 90s, and then more light, fast guys are coming through and being successful. Obviously, led by the likes of Renault and Mondo. But we're definitely seeing that, and I feel like Ben fits that mold. Would you agree?
Yes and no. I agree completely that there's a new type of athletes during the last decade coming in. I think Renault is the first in this. He's a small guy and doesn't weigh a lot. Mondo is about the same. They're all fast, and I think that's where kind of the difference is. I think Ben is not really the fastest guy. He's fast, but I think he's definitely efficient in his plan, and that makes him faster, I guess. That, and I think if you what I think the differences between the guys before and now with Renault and Mondo is that these guys have a lot more feeling of the pole, that they have a lot more coordination and feel how the pole can adapt or how they can jump and adapt the pole to their likes. And get more out of the pole, while the other guys before did more of strength and height. They had more of that and didn't have to. And there's also a difference there with Ben. I wouldn't consider him as being the most talented guy. That's maybe strange to say, seeing his accomplishments, but if you look towards feeling the pole or coordination wise, I think I had better athletes, and that he's not someone that adapts very fast. He like, change is difficult for him, but once he gets it, once he understands it and he does it, then he can do it all the time. So, and I think you can see that also in his competitions. Once he makes that 570, it's like the 570 comes out every time, basically. And so that's I think the thing that's different with Ben compared to the others a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I mean, I might ask this to all. I know we were going to kind of do intros first, but I might ask this to all three of you. But you've talked about the feeling with the pole being a distinguishing factor for the likes of Renault and Mondo and maybe a few other people in the modern era of pole vaulting. And I find it hard to disagree. I think it's a great observation. But ultimately, what do you think's driving that better feeling? Is it volume of jumps? Is it jumping from a younger age? You know, why have people got this better feeling than they had 20 years ago?
I think jumping at a younger age is a big influence, because if I look right now in Belgium, there's a couple of guys, or I see some guys that can do things when they're 8-10 years old. Still, when I would say, like, don't touch any poles, it's too early for you. I don't want you to get into any competitions or whatever. But they can do things on the poles because they have this coordination a lot more than you have when you're in a later stage of your career. There's this guy in Belgium that he can act like Mondo, Curtis. He just does his jumps all like, okay, today I'm going to switch to Sam Kendrick, so I'm going to do a Sam Kendrick jumps, and he does. And that would not be possible for a guy like Ben or for me when I was young. And these guys have so much coordination when they're young, and have that feeling much more that they're capable of doing those things. So I think, and that with a lot of jumping, of course.
Yeah. Steve and Gustav, I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I think it also has a bit to do how you approach the training sessions. Like, I remember in the past time from my old training group when I was still an athlete, that the main focus on the training for most of us was like jumping high, even on training. So a lot of us didn't actually get a chance to develop this skill, like the field skill. Like as soon as you made a good jump, you were told to take a bigger pole, raise the grip, or do these kind of things to get a higher height. But to stay on a certain pole and to work on something that actually helps you develop your technique and develop your feel and be able to adjust. Like today, maybe the pole was feeling a bit soft. What can I change? What can I do better to actually clear the same height with the same pole even on this day? So when you actually come to the competition and it's game on and you're going to go for the big poles, your technique or your confidence, or it will be more consistent. Like it's easier to make these changes though. Are you see what I'm saying?
Oh, 100. Look, yeah, I think it's a really, really good observation. I agree. I think I get caught in the trap sometimes of pushing more grip or more pole when actually it would be useful for the guys to just do a better jump. But you're right, they've got to have been trained that way in order to be able to have that in their toolbox to do a better jump.
Yeah, because I think it's so much to repetition. Like you say, you make a really nice jump, you have a certain pole and everything clicks, and the pole is getting too soft and the coach tells you, okay, nice jump, go up a pole. Sometimes maybe, okay, can you do that 5 times in a row?
Yeah, it's a good point. Steve, anything else on that topic?
I'd say one of the biggest things that changed in the last 30 years is planting technique. I think pole vaulters' planting technique is much better in the last 30 years. Even average pole vaulters have really good planting technique and takeoff mechanics. Everyone's taking off further out than they used to. Nobody's taking off. People don't take off inside as much as people were before, So I think that's really helped the pole vaulters to work with the pole. Pole technology has not changed a lot in the last 25 years. That hasn't been a predetermining factor. But I definitely think plant and take off. And part of it maybe is the fact that, when I first started coaching, there was no internet. There was no YouTube. We had Ganson's book at Mechanics of Pole Vault, and that was, I was in Perth. That was the only way we kind of learned about pole vault, and we learned by doing ourselves, and when I see now it's so much resources that you can access that I think that probably makes everyone's learning curve much quicker.
Yeah, that's another great point. Yeah, it's really good. Really good. Stephen, I'm going to come back to you just to finish up your kind of introductory bit. And yeah, I mean, Steve talked about the plant there. Ben's got a beautiful plant. I love the way that Ben he has these really soft hands. He plants the pole really nice, takes off brilliantly. I love watching him jump in that way. But you've talked about he's not like a super talented guy. And you talked about the fact that he's not a super fast learner. And yet this guy's jumped, one of the most consistent series of jumps on the circuit this year, just completely dialed in between 70 and 80. I think was 4th on the world merit rankings that got announced recently. Even though I think he's not in the top 10 ranked in terms of height, he's so consistent, which you've already mentioned. So what is it that makes Ben great at what he does, and how have you kind of created an environment around him and nurtured that?
I think the one thing that I appreciate the most of Ben is the fact that is his work ethics. I never have to tell the guy to watch his food or doesn't do his exercise or go sleep early or anything. Maybe the last one, sometimes, not always, but still, like, his work ethics are enormous and he does it very easily. He thinks it's normal. If you were top athlete, that's the way you should act and that's the way you got to go. And it's true, but still you got to do it. And with him, it's 24/7. I mean, it's more, he's like a machine in that way. And yeah, there's a lot of respect that you got to have for someone like that who can act like that 24/7 and always on point on everything. The thing of him learning fast is I think it's very important, and that's something that I know him from a long time. I think now for 14-15 years. But I still get to know him better and better. And one of the big things is he has to know why he does it. He has to understand it. He has to, and now that he's older, he's getting more and more into science as well. And so he gets the things better. He understands the muscles better. He understands the biomechanics better. And if you can explain then how this works, all of a sudden you see that click coming in his head for him to adjust something. And in the beginning, it's not easy because he's kind of a stiff kind of guy. But once he gets that, he can loosen up again and then make it work for him. And then it's like he never did something else. And that's the great part. Once he has troubles in the beginning to get it, but once he gets it, he can do it 100 times after a while, and then it's programmed in this machine kind of way again.
Yeah, super interesting, and it's really reassuring to know that you don't have to have the most talented guy to still get a guy to jump 580 if he's got great work ethic and he's got certain skills around studying his event and understanding his event, and then really kind of putting in the time to learn this craft. That's great to know.
I might not want to say that he's not talented, but he has difficulty to adjust on certain things.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. And Ben, if you're watching tonight, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say you weren't talented. Last but not least, I'm coming to him last because he has the highest personal best out of all of the panelists this evening.
Oh, yes.
So I pay him that respect and come to him last. But Gustav, just take us on a bit of a trip through your kind of coaching journey to date.
Well, I've been a pole vaulter for 25 years. Well, me and my friend was watching the Olympics back in '92, and we just got hooked just with a pole vaulting. Not like we got hooked on athletics, we got hooked on pole vaulting. So we started jumping in my friend's backyard, and we had small competitions, and well, it just took a grip of me and never let go since then. So from the start, I was super interested in every part of the pole vault. Like I borrowed my father's VCR to, record those competitions that were sent on Swedish television and try to learn how people were jumping. And I did those kind of things like Steven talked about. Like I was pretending I was Rodion Gataulin or Maxim Tarasov or Sergei Bubka or whoever, and I learned how to jump like these guys. I could switch my technique because we were playing around. Like today you're gonna be Bubka and you're gonna be Tarasov, and we had to jump according to how those guys were jumping. So after that, I just kept on doing it all the way until I think 2011 or something. I got back problems and I hadn't improved my PR for 3 or 4 years or something like that, and I didn't feel like it wasn't really worth it to keep on pushing with all those pain in my body and jumping about 20-30 centimeters below my personal best. So I stopped, and at the time I was doing my education as a teacher in physics and sports and mathematics. Haven't had any real plan on staying on as a coach, but my former coach Pekka Dalhöjd from Sweden, he suddenly passed away and I had to step in. So I've been coaching for about 10 years now, and built up a group here in Gothenburg with athletes from young athletes from low levels all the way up to a few top level athletes. And I think that's a bit of a charm of it also, to have this group who is so spread out. Like as a coach, it really helps you develop all the aspects of leadership to use to work with those athletes.
So you mean when you say all the different athletes, you mean some younger athletes within the club structure right the way through to the elite level?
Yeah, exactly. Like there is a total different approach on how you're gonna, like there is one part of being a trainer teaching them how to pole vault, or then there is one part of being a coach, like at the competitions to maximize the performance, and then there is the leadership aspect, which I think is maybe the most important part of what we do. And that part is so different from coaching someone who wants an Olympic medal to someone who maybe have problems at home and wants to just be with the group and have friends there.
No, for sure. But it's an interesting debate that we have here in the UK a lot, is can you be a great coach working with children and being a great coach working at the elite end of the spectrum? And I totally hear what you're saying. I think it's great for the coach to develop their skills by working throughout that continuum. But maybe I'll ask you that question. Do you think you can be a great coach for children all the way through the pathway and still do a great job trying to help people win Olympic medals?
Well, I think you can. It depends also on the size of your group. My group is 13 athletes, and I have a job as a full-time coach, so I can spend a lot of time on what I do. And I also has a former pole vaulter. He was an athlete of mine. He stopped vaulting like 3-4 years ago, but now he stepped in as an assistant coach. He helps me out when, let's say, we have a small meet in Sweden and it collides with the Diamond League meet, and I need to go to the Diamond League meet, so he can step in and he can help me out. So I think it's just really a matter of time.
Yeah, for sure. I understand. Yeah. Okay, cool. And look, my follow-up question on your intro then is going to be around we'll talk about the elite end of the spectrum, and you've got some really special talents, in Mika and Melker and Sondre, of course, who's now splitting his time, I think, between you and in the US. But you have some really exciting talents. And how do you find the balance between giving those guys enough work to help them achieve those really, really high level objectives and win global medals versus keeping them healthy? Because that's the challenge, right? That's the balance. How can you work them enough but not too much that they get injured? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, when the athletes has reached that certain level, like those three, they are already on like a high level standard in pole vaulting. It's more looking to what things are the contributive factors of their performance and what things needs to be improved and what things can be like you can put away. Like you can, let's say you have been pole vaulting for so long, like even me, I haven't been jumping for 10 years, but if I step on the runway today, I would be slower, I would be weaker, I would use soft poles and low grips, but my technique, it would look similar, and within like 3 or 4 weeks I think I would be back jumping almost exactly the way I was. So you shouldn't be afraid to take like a time and step back. Let's say you have problems and you feel sore and you feel tired. Don't be afraid to take some rest or to skip a session or two to keep healthy, because to have consistency, I think it's the most important thing to improve. Like if you have those ups and downs, especially when you're at the top level, because the mental game is so important there, like to be able to handle the stress and the pressure of big competitions and using big poles and high grips, and that is really connected to how you feel. Like if you feel strong and healthy and motivated, it's a bit easier. So for those guys, we say like for Melker, okay, you need to work on these things. So we focus a lot of these things during some periods, and we step back of some other things, and then when we think things are good enough, we take the next step. But always be really like, always look for how are they feeling, how are their status right now, so we can adjust. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, interesting stuff. Definitely food for thought. Steve, I'm going to come to my next question in just a second, but just picking up on something that Gustav mentioned there that we've talked about a couple of times is, we're constantly accumulating more knowledge and more information and new training ideas and seeing different methodologies that we want to bring into our own training. But Gustav's right, you can't do everything. So how do you kind of manage that balance of bringing new stuff in, but then kind of not just adding and adding and adding till you have this program that's just all consuming? How do you kind of manage that substitution process?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my program is a program I've developed over 30 years, but the basic core of the program has stayed pretty similar. towards my ideologies and my basic understanding of what I'm trying to develop. And then when I discover or want to try new things, I have to work out what am I going to take out to put this in, because you can't keep adding. And if I think now the training programs I do now compared to training programs I do in Australia, there's a lot less volume. I think when I was in Australia, I did a lot of volume. And I don't know, the guys were okay with that volume, but I don't know if I just had a bunch of guys that were physically pretty strong. And I think the environment of training outdoors in Australia with warm weather, good sunshine, it also helps with recovery. But no, it's always a tricky balance. And if, for myself, if it's a physical thing that I'm going to change, then what I do is in the summer or the off season, I'll experiment with it. Like when you stay with me this summer, I've been playing with kettlebells and maces and clubs this summer, and I've been trying to work out how to incorporate that into my training. So I'll play with the exercises first, see how they feel, see how I react, and then slowly bring new exercise into the training program. But from a technical aspect, if we're going to try something new, a new type of way of teaching pole vault, then you have to be pretty careful. That's always, I think it's more about problem solving around the athlete you're working with and the individual circumstances of what you're trying to fix about that person you're working with. So that's when you kind of have to discover new things to try to develop individuals.